Good morning, students. Welcome to the subject of environmental science. We are dealing with unit number 1, part B. In the previous section, that means in part A, we have already studied about the introduction of environment. We have tried to see in brief that what is our environment made up of and how it is useful to us in different ways. We have tried to check out the biological biogeochemical cycles. We have tried to see how the chemicals and elements keep on circulating from earth to atmosphere, that means from biotic to abiotic sections, and how the nature works. That is what we have seen in the A part. We have also introduced ourselves in the previous lecture with the introduction to environmental studies. What is this environmental study? We have already seen it in the previous lecture. We have checked out with the meaning and definitions, principles of environmental science. We have already studied, right? Today we will go for another 2 or 3 concepts. But before that, let us refresh the points so that you can connect to today's session. If we try to just see that what is environmental science, then we can say that it is field of science. It is such a field of science that studies the interaction of physical, chemical and biological component of the environment. That means somewhere or the other, it is such a kind of study in which we can have the interaction, or we can study the interaction of what few elements in the environment, like physical, chemical and biological components, right? It also studies what it does more. It also studies the relationship and effect of what components with the organisms in the environment. That means how a connection is created, how interaction or relationship is being created between the components on the earth and the organisms living. That means biotic and abiotic connections, relationship we can study under this broad section of environmental science. The field of environmental science is done, or basically is for the 3 motives. Why do we need to study environmental science? Because it helps us to learn how the natural world works, right? It also tells us to understand that as human, how we interact with the environment, and to determine that how we affect the environment. The last point is very, very crucial. Why? Because with the help of the study of environmental science, we can come to know how the nature works. કુદરત કઈ રીતે કામ કરે છે, right? Sometimes we feel magical that how the seasons are created. Sometimes we feel that the cycle of the environment or nature goes on with its own pace, right? Means how this magic is created, that we can come to know with the help of this study. Next is to understand it. Even with the help of environment science, we can understand that how human interacts with the environment. That means we, the living beings, how we interact with the environment, what do we do in the environment, how our activities affect the environment, and vice versa, right? And what negative or positive effects do we create once we study the environmental science. We come to know that what will create what should we do, and at the end what we shouldn't do it, so that we can protect the earth. That means the third point is of prime concern to us in the present scenario, which tells us that it gives us the indication. With the help of the study of this particular subject, we come to know that how our activities, or we as general, affect the environment, right? So the environmental science also tells us, also focuses, if we are studying environmental science, then at the end we come to know that how the sustainable life on earth can be there, how we can have the practical perspective. That means how we can have the perception to observe and learn that how the environment works, right? And we can adopt to those kind of approaches in our routine life which protects our earth. That means with the help of this study, we can come to know that what will affect, which approaches will affect in what ways, how we should behave and how we should act in the environment, so that in the long run we are not affecting the environment adversely, right? And we can also come to know that what are the justified use, or what can be considered as the justified use of the natural resources, because natural resources, we find it in abundance, but somewhere or the other they are bifurcated in two parts, that is renewable and non-renewable. Renewable are all those resources which in the next unit we will be learning about the same, right? But we must understand that, see, whatever we get it in from the nature, that doesn't mean that it will be in abundance forever. If we keep on using it without its justification, then what will happen? The day is not far that we will be without that particular resource. It may happen so we must understand that what type of resources we are using in what amount. That means if it is a renewable, it's fine that it keeps on generating new type of say resources whenever required. But if it is non-renewable means which cannot be replenished, which cannot be filled over and more and more times, it cannot be refilled. Once it is used forever. If we are using this resources in say adverse manner, means we are not justifying its use, we are overusing these natural resources, then the day is not far that we will be out of these resources, we will be not having these resources anymore on the planet, right? So all these things we get to know if we are studying the subject of environmental science, or if we are studying this particular area, then we get to know about all these aspects of environment. This we have done earlier in the previous session, right? Here few definitions have been given, I am not repeating any more time. It is already clear with the explanation that I have given to you, right? We move directly to the latest and today's topic, which tells us about the scope of environment. Scope means area of work, all right? That means if the environmental scope, we try to recollect environmental scope, then we'll come to know that environment can be of what types, or what is environment made up of, what is its area, what is the scope. Then if you remember, there are 4 scopes of environment, right? That means lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere and biosphere. These 4 are such kind of scopes, or such kind of areas which makes the environment, which actually constructs the environment. And the same thing, because we are learning about environment, the same thing proceeds also as the scope of environmental science. For your reference, this has already been told to you, this has already been explained to you quite in detail. Again, I am not going to repeat it, but I'll just make it the point clear to you so that you can recollect it fast. So if we are talking about the scope of environment or environmental science, more or less it remains the same, except we can add more areas of work as far as environmental science as a subject is concerned. So here we can divide the environmental scope, or maybe the components of environment, in 4 parts. If you remember, it is the lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere and biosphere, as you can see on the slide, right? If we just try to recollect what is lithosphere, then lithosphere can be considered as the outer layer of solid consisting of some kind of minerals that occurs in the earth's crust in the soil. That means in the soil, whatever the matter is present, whatever the hard substance is there as the outer layer of the earth, that can be considered as a part of lithosphere. If we go with the hydrosphere, then the name itself tells you that it is such a kind of area or scope which consists of the water resources. It may be oceans, rivers, lakes, reservoirs, glaciers, even the groundwater can be the part of it, even the ice caps or streams can be the part of hydrosphere, right? We have studied earlier also that ocean contains 97% of the water, whereas 2% of the water is being held up in the ice, right? Only 1% fresh water remains in the lakes and the rivers which we are using, and which keeps on circulating from earth to atmosphere, and in the form of rain we get it back and we again use it for the human purposes, right? Or human or living purposes. This is what is all about hydrosphere, right? If we see the atmosphere consists of what? It is a kind of protective layer on the surface of the earth, right, which consists of so many kind of gases like nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, etc., and it helps and affects to balance the earth, right. See, few things are required, few gases are required for the survival of the human beings, or maybe the animals, like oxygen, whereas carbon dioxide is such a kind of gas which is required more or less by the plants to for their survival. That means each and or every organism has its own proportion of gases to be consumed, and with that they can actually survive. So it is that part of the earth which consists of the gases, and it is a kind of covering layer of the earth. So we have cleared out what is lithosphere, connected with land, and it is the hard substance covering the earth, right, or on the surface of the earth, whereas hydrosphere is concerned with the water, atmosphere is concerned with the air and gases, for which makes almost the kind of belt, protective belt over the earth, right. As far as biosphere is concerned, it is a kind of area in which the living organism have their interaction with the environment. Means it is such a kind of area. Bio is the meaning of bio is having life. That means wherever the life exists and it interacts with the atmosphere, hydrosphere and lithosphere, that area, that belt, that realm can be considered as biosphere, right. So this makes the environmental scope also, and this is also the scope of the environmental study, right, or environmental science. Even we can have more number of areas that can be studied under the environmental science. So if you are being asked that what is the scope of environmental science, yes, we can introduce ourselves with the basic four major scopes, that is lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere and biosphere. As far as the other areas of concern of environmental science is concerned, we can also introduce ourselves to few more points. Let us study them in detail. It also includes the areas like conservation of natural resources. Conservation means to protect, right. Sachavu, that is said to be conservation. So it also studies about, or the area of work, the where the environmental study actually exists, is also the conservation of natural resources. Then we can come to know about so many ecological matters, right. It is concerned with earth, whatever the matters concerned with earth, we will come to know about that. We can also come to know what pollutes the earth and how we can control the pollution. That also becomes the area. Next is social issues connected to environment. There are so many social issues that may be connected to environment, but unless we don't understand environment, unless we are not clear with the matter of environment, then we may not be able to actually relate the social issues and find the solutions to these problems, right. Next is impact of human population on earth's environment. That means how the population and the earth environment is concerned. That means if we have the population increasing day by day, how it affects the environment, how it creates its own pressure on the environment, that also can be studied. It also creates the environment, or it also creates a kind of awareness. It also creates a kind of sensible approach of the human beings towards protecting the environment. It also motivates. Next is, it also motivates the people and their activity of participating in the environmental protection. You must have seen so many movements related to the environmental protection. That awareness, that motivation can be created with the study of environment. Next, developing the skills to avoid environmental issues. Naturally, with the help of the study, we will come to know what is there and what should be there, how, what in what aspects we are lacking to protect the environment, why the environment is so much of importance to everyone, every organization or every organisms on the earth, sorry. And likewise we come to know everything related to environment, which then otherwise would have not been possible. So it gives us a pure guidance and a pure awareness. It provides a kind of skills that how now you have to manage with the environment and what can be done so that the environment can be protected. Next, developing awareness for preserving natural resources. That means if the natural resources are there, then how we can protect it. In the just before a few minutes I told you that how the natural resources can be divided into renewable and non-renewable. Renewable can be used for more times, but non-renewable should be used in a very justified manner, and that it teaches us with the help of environmental science. So if we are asked with the scope of environmental science, we can say that there are major 4 sections of environmental science, and that is lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, biosphere, and it also tells us about all these points that we have tried to study here, that if we want to understand environmental science, or if we want to know about environmental science, then these many things are included in its study, right? So that was the 4th point that we have done of this particular B part. We are moving towards the 5th one, that is human environment relationship. See, we must understand this, that human beings cannot survive without environment. We, as the most superior creatures on the earth, create a special type of relationship with the environment, not only for our existence but for so many things. For our economic development also, we highly depend upon environment. We get the raw materials from the environment, we try to process it, and we try to bring it into the consumable outputs, right? We try to see that the outputs are such that actually satisfies the need. That means everything that is available in raw cannot be used, and that is why we try to bring those inputs into proper outputs through proper type of process. So that see, I give you the simplest example. If the wood is to be used from the trees are the natural resource, right? If we want to get the wood, it is the trees who are the source, right? And from where if we want to have the wood, then we need to cut the trees. The wood cannot be used as it is. If you want to use it for the purpose of, say, bench, then it has to be processed. This raw wood cannot be used. Anything from nature as it is cannot be used every time, right? Raw જે એનું કાચું જે ફોર્મ છે એમાં ને એમાં આપણે વાપરી શકતા નથી. We have to bring it to a polished commodity, so that ultimately we can use it to the best, right? So that is what we try to do normally. And what are we doing here? We are creating a kind of relationship of what? Relationship of human beings with the environment. How? Then we get the raw materials, we try to process it, we bring it to in the form of outputs. These outputs are sold by the manufacturer, right? And ultimately the economy runs. This is the simplest way we can explain the human environmental relationship. So it is a kind of connection that is being created by the humans with the environment. So we will try to just brief it out here. It is the interaction between human social system and environment. It is very complex as it is divided into many subsystems, right? It's only one thing that I have tried to explain. It is just one subsystem that I have tried to explain here, that if we interact with the environment, then it may be in the form of so many things. Suppose agricultural products are there, then that may be used in the raw form, right? Fruits or veggies, we can use it in the raw form, then we are connected in that sense. But every one of us cannot have their own fields from where we can get all the products. So what we depend upon the farmers. Now what do these farmers create? They try to create the crops, they try to grow the crops, they harvest it, and in one or the other form it comes up in the form of food to us. That means this is just a subsystem that we are trying to learn here. There are so many subsystems in the around us that actually explains the human environmental relationship. It's very complex because we are interdependent on so many things, and we try to change the form and bring it to one consumable item. Since the evolution of humans, we have been totally dependent on environment. We know that from the very stage of primitive man, right? આદિમાનવ કાળથી લગભગ આપણે એના પર ડિપેન્ડન્ટ હોઈએ કે આપણે જે વસ્તુ જ્યાં પાણી અથવા તો ફૂડ મળી રહે છે, where you get food and water, people used to travel to those places, right? Used to find those places, and then they used to settle down in the form of community. That means from the very beginning of our creation, we have been connected to environment in so many ways. Again, it indicates how people adapt to the environment and how they change it. That means it also like, because we are connected somewhere or the other with the environment, we try to, whatever activities we do, we create a kind of impression on the environment, and environment either gets protected. If you are planting few more trees in your garden, that means you are protecting the environment, you are actually connecting the environment in a positive way, right? But if you are disturbing the environment by say dumping the garbage, or cutting down the trees, not taking care of the pollution through the vehicles, all these affects the environment and change it, right? So we, in one or the other ways, what we are trying to see from these points is that we try to create the relationship, or in each case we are creating a relationship, whether good or bad, that's a different thing, right? That's a later on state, but we try to connect, and we have to connect with environment, because we live in environment, and without it our survival is not possible. It includes how people depend on environment. I told you, right? For the single most thing to survive, say for the example air, the air we breathe or the oxygen we breathe, we cannot have it by our own. It is the natural gas that we try to inhale, and we give out the carbon dioxide, which is helpful for the plants to live. That means in one or the other ways we are highly dependent on environment. Next, how people adapt to environment. It also tells us that how we are adapting ourselves to environment. Suppose from a very cold region, if you move to say the hot region, that means how our body reacts to it and how we get adapted. એટલે આપણે કેવી રીતે એન્વાયરમેન્ટને સ્વીકારી શકીએ છીએ, એ ચેન્જને આપણે અપનાવી શકીએ છીએ, and how we get accustomed or adjusted to it, and how people modify the environment. That means modify કરવું એટલે change કરવો, right? So how with for our purpose, for our selfish interest, we create or we change the environment very normally, without realizing that any change in environment can cause any adverse effect. That means in these many ways, what we have tried to understand with these points, we have tried to understand that in these ways we are trying to connect with the environment. We are not trying, actually we are connected with the environment with so many aspects, right? So that is what we have seen. When we are trying to connect, we get to see few characteristics. We get to see that it has got a typical setup. આપણે જ્યારે એન્વાયરમેન્ટ સાથે આપણી હ્યુમન રિલેશનશિપ એની સાથે કનેક્ટ કરીએ છીએ અથવા ક્રિએટ કરીએ છીએ, તો એની અમુક કેરેક્ટરિસ્ટિક્સ છે, એની અમુક લાક્ષણિકતા છે, right? There are some few attributes, and these characteristics will be studying one by one. Suppose number one, the society in which we live, or we can say attitude of society. Say it includes what is society made up of? It is made up of human beings, it is made up of population, how they value their life, how their beliefs are, what is their knowledge level, what is how much technology do they use, how educated they are, helps to decide their attitude towards the society. Suppose see, few tribes still live in forest area, right? They still live in pure nature. Now we can definitely say that their attitude towards environment would be what? To save the environment, to protect it, because they are directly connected to it. Whereas we as human beings, as urbanized people, maybe we may be using the technology very hard, right? Or we may be having the values and beliefs that we cannot connect directly all the time with alertness with the environment, right? That means in what society, in what typical type of society do you live, that is very important characteristic. That is the attitude of the society that decides how you are connected with the environment. Number two comes up is benefits received. That means whatever advantages we get from the environment, on the basis of that we can connect. That means people modify the environment for their own reasons. That means for our own selfish reasons. Sorry. We may have the use of environment, like see, if we want to have the land for industries, or if we want to take up with the mining, if we want to use the land for agriculture, if we want to create any dams or any infrastructural facility, then at that time, without realizing that what effect or what will affect the environment, to what extent we try to get the benefit from the environment. But actually environment is made up for us, it is for making our lives easy, but somewhere we need to see that whatever benefits we receive, that we take it from environment, but do we reciprocate it? That means આપણે કોઈ પણ સંબંધ હોય, રિલેશનશિપ હોય, એ અરસપરસ હોય, રાઈટ. દેટ મીન્સ ઇટ ઇઝ બેઝડ ઓન રેસિપ્રોકેશન, ગીવ એન્ડ ટેક હોય. તો આપણે લઈએ છીએ પણ આપણે એન્વાયરમેન્ટને આપણે પાછું શું આપીએ છીએ? દેન વી મસ્ટ નોટ બી ગિવિંગ ધ પોલ્યુશન, વી મે નોટ બી ગિવિંગ ઓલ ધ એડવર્સ ઇફેક્ટ્સ, વી શુડ નોટ બી પાસિંગ it on to the environment, and that we must learn. But here what we are learning is characteristic, that means what type of benefit we receive, direct benefits hoy, amuk indirect benefits hoy, on the basis of that the relationship is conducted, right. Next is co-adaptation between nature and human beings. The changes and activities of nature as well as environment affect each other. Co-adaptation એટલે co means to living together, coexistence એવો આપણે શબ્દ વાપરતા હોય છે. Co means it tells you that few more things are also there with you, right. So it is co-adaptation between one, co-adaptation of nature with human beings and human beings with nature. So our activities affect the environment and environmental activities also affect us. Suppose if it is a catastrophe, or we can say if there is a disaster, right. If it is the natural disaster like flood, then it will automatically affect our lifestyle, it will automatically affect the living of the people. It may be heavy rainfalls in that case, earthquakes in that case. That means the natural disasters create a kind of effect on the human beings, and even the activities of human beings create the effects on the environment very normally. So we co-adapt each other very easily. Next characteristic is interlink. We have already seen this, that there is a link between the activities and the environment. That means human activities constantly creates pressure on the environment at times. We keep on mining, that means we keep on drilling the earth's surface, we try to get the minerals out of it. In that case we are actually disturbing the earth crust, right. And this is just an example. So this is how, because we try to create the link, we are interlinked somewhere. Human activities one or the other ways creates the pressure on the environment. Next, and the fifth one, we are all aware about it, that is said to be technological changes. The technology changes, people want more say kind of luxury, they want kind of comforts, and with that we can only get it through technology. That is what we have adapted. But this technology, none of us thinks that if does this technology have a greater harmony with the environment or not, right. So initially, previously, when people used to live on earth, or when they were there, they had a greater harmony than us with the environment, right. They lived in the environment, connecting it very positively to it. But due to technological advancement, we have created so many types of radiations, so many types of other changes have come up, which has led the environment to a disturbance, which has created the environmental changes to great extent. These are the characteristics, mind you, that tells us that how human and environmental relationship can be described. If the nature is asked, characteristics are asked of the human environment relationship, we can note down this, right. We are moving towards the last part of the session, that is said to be causes. Now, causes of environmental destruction. We have seen what is environment, we have seen what it is made up of, right. We have seen how the chemicals keeps on changing its form, what is ecology, what is ecosystem. We have seen this everything in detail, right. And when we study this, it is said to be environmental science. We have seen environmental science, we have seen its principles. We have also seen in today's lecture about the say how we create our relationship with environment. Means more or less we have tried to connect with the subject very easily with this A and B part of unit 1, right. We are moving towards very important area and very known area to us. Without knowing about this area, or without realizing that we cause this much of environmental destruction, the study of environmental science may be little bit useless. So we need to understand that what causes, what are those activities which causes the environmental destruction. Why we are learning this? So that somewhere in future we can create our we will be seeing it in the further part of the unit, that how if we come to know that these are the causes, right. Causes means આ કારણો છે environmental destruction ના, environment બગડવાના, environment ને ખરાબ કરવાના કારણો છે. તો how we can stop somewhere and not causing the environmental destruction. In fact, we can protect the environment. So unless the cause is not clear to us, we will not be able to take the steps for it. So what we are doing here in this section, we are trying to see that what are the environmental destruction. The first and the foremost point that comes up as the environmental destruction can be considered as land degradation. Degradation. D is always telling you about the decrease, right? A decrease in the quality, maybe decrease in the amount, that tells you DE is always denoting that, right? So first and foremost cause is land degradation. Land degradation means land ની જે ગુણવત્તા છે, જે ક્વોલિટી છે, રાઈટ, એ જે આપણને આપી શકે છે, but because of overusing it, because of our mining activities, because of cutting down the forest, because of urbanization, because of so much of expansion of cities and towns in so many vast areas, fragmenting of the habitat, that means we have divided the forest into different tribes. And like that, what happens is we are trying to degrade the land. We cannot take up the land there properly, we cannot use it properly, and what happens, it degrades, right? So its quality degrades. So steps for conservation should be taken up, steps to see that we are not degrading the land, we are not using it for over agricultural purposes. Even if we are using it, we are not we will see in the other part also that we are not using such kind of material or such kind of chemicals which affects the land directly. That means this is the first cause of land degradation. For our comforts, for our development, we don't realize that land is getting affected, and that's the biggest reason of environmental destruction, that is land degradation. The next comes up, this was about lithosphere, right? We are moving towards the next part, that is said to be overfishing. Overfishing means we are talking about hydrosphere right now. That means the whatever the water bodies are there on the surface of the earth, right, somewhere or the other, they have the creatures in them. We have seen in the ecosystems, right, we have seen in the aquatic ecosystem that so many types of creatures live underwater, and if we try to disturb them, if we try to say here one only single factor is taken up of overfishing, that means in a small body of water, if there are few numbers of fishes, and if we try to overfish, means more than the number of fishes it produces or it has, we try to use it as our food, then what happens is we are overfishing it, disturbing the whole water ecosystem. That means we should stop somewhere. We should understand this, that all species are a part of very large ecosystem, right? And if we keep on killing such species means jati, right, જે પણ aquatic animals છે એની જે જાતિ છે એને if we keep on killing it for our reasons, then it will damage the whole ecosystem, right? So there has to be strict law that should be followed so that we can stop this and we can protect the ecosystem. So that is about overfishing, the next important cause. Third one comes up is use of artificial fertilizers for agricultural pollution. That means what we do is, it's not actually agriculture pollution, it is agriculture production, right? To have a land has its own capacity to produce crops and produce the fruits maybe, right? So crops are produced in a limited quantity, but because the population has increased, we highly depend on these production. So what happens, we try to grow more number of items on the agricultural land. For that, what do we use? We use the artificial fertilizers. Now every time these artificial fertilizers may be sprinkled on the land, and it gets collected at the say it gets settled down at some level of the land. What happens because of that? It starts releasing few type of chemicals which are not good for land. So in that way it is disturbing the agricultural land or maybe land. So that happens which is related to say lithosphere, and we, with the overuse of artificial fertilizers, we pollute or we create a destruction of land, because here we will find it out that it is connected to lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere and biosphere, because they are the components of earth, right? And when we are learning about environment, we cannot just stick to land, we cannot just stick to water, it is as a wholesome we have to connect it. Next comes up is poverty creates the pressure on environment naturally. Due to poverty, what happens is, poverty means you are not having sufficient amount of food to eat. So what happens is that it creates, like most of the people, say about around 35% of the people live under the below the poverty line, right? So for they have very few options to survive, and what do? They highly depend then on the natural resources like water, food and shelter, but that is not available in enough quantity to them. So what happens is they take more amount of, or they consume more amount of natural resources, and because of that they are destructing the environment in one or the other ways. So what happens is it creates the kind of pressure on the environment, disturbing the whole ecology, disturbing the whole ecosystem. What should be done then? These poor people should be provided with some other economic activities so that they don't have to depend directly on the environment. That should be done, but this is one of the cause of environmental destruction. Next comes up is extreme use of fossil fuels. Now fossil fuels are the coals, right? They are the major source of energy, and whatever energy we get, it is through this. So if we keep on, because we highly depend on industries highly depend on this source, and this source we get it only from the nature. Fossil fuels we get it from the nature, and if it's we keep on using it excessively, then what happens is that fossil fuels keep on depleting. Depleting means at some or the other point it gets vanished, it gets say એ જલ્દીથી પૂરા થવા લાગ્યા છે, જલ્દી ખતમ થવા લાગે છે, એન્ડ ફોસિલ ફ્યુલ્સ બનતા વર્ષોના વર્ષો નીકળી જાય છે. સો ઇફ વી કીપ ઓન યુઝિંગ ઇટ, યસ, યુસેજ ઇઝ ગ્રેટર ઓન ધી અધર સાઇડ, બટ ધ જનરેશન ઓર જનરેટિંગ ફોસિલ ફ્યુલ્સ ટેક્સ ઇટ્સ ઓન say number of years. Then in that case we are imbalancing that, so we need to develop such kind of technology which provides us with the alternative source of energy other than fossil fuels, say like sunlight, right? So it is the solar energy, the wind energy, the tidal energy, which we get it in ample, we get it as the abundance from the nature. We should find out more usage of such kind of source rather than going for the fossil fuels. So extreme use of fossil fuels is also one of the reason. Next comes up is overconsumption of resources. This I have also explained it to you earlier, that we keep on using, or I think whatever resources are available, if we keep on using it without replenishing it, means without refilling it, somewhere or the other the stock will get out of it, or we will be out of stock, right? We will not get the stock in enough. So what should be done is, actually we should try to control the consumption of resources so that ultimately we can balance the nature, right? So that is also one of the reason that we over consume the resources. Next comes up is lack of law enforcement mechanism. That means we do have the environmental protection laws, but the mechanism, the system through which this is implemented is not properly utilized, or is not properly conducted. So what happens is, we see the enforcement of law on the paper itself, but we can't see it in the action. And when this happens, even if the protective laws are made for the environment, we will not be able to make the best out of it. Next comes up is wastage from animals. See, there are so many animals, they dump waste in the nature as it is, and with that what happens is, they give out few kind of dangerous gases like methane gas, and it gets mixed up with the atmospheric gases, other gases, and it creates a lot of pollution. So somewhere or the other, even the animals are one of the reason that destructs the environment or degrades the environment, right? Next comes up is about the hydrofracking system. Hydrofracking system is such a kind of a system in which there is the release of very dangerous gases into the environment, and what it creates the severe problems, right? Severe problems when it mixes with the water bodies and contaminates it. That means whatever through hydrofracking, whatever the gases are being released, they mix with one or the other water bodies and it contaminates it. That means એને એ આખા વોટરને પોલ્યુટ કરી નાખે છે, and that because of that the content of few dangerous gases increases, and it keeps it is really very dangerous for the environment also, and it may create severe diseases also at times, right? Then next comes up 10th one is said to be about the too much of urbanization. શહેરીકરણ, urbanization એટલે શહેરીકરણ, in which people leaving their village, people leaving the very natural area, the natural habitat, they, because in the search of maybe any kind of job, or in search of kind of work or an economic activity, they leave their own natural way of living, and they try to migrate it to the urban areas. Urban areas means it is said to be the areas wherein they get all the other facilities, but the nature in its pure sense is not available. So what happens is, in the urban area the pressure on the land increases, you have to provide with the facilities to these people, and ultimately what happens is that we are creating a kind of pressure on these areas. So over urbanization is also one of the reason of the destruction, right? Next comes up is coal mining. I told you we highly depend upon the fossil fuels. Coal is the major source of energy, and because of that constantly industries increases, our usage of coal increases. We have to get it from nature. Coal we get it from nature, all of us know it, right? So what happens is we keep on mining. આપણે જે earth crust છે એને drill કરતા જાય, we try to take the coal out of it, and what happens is it releases too much amount of carbon dioxide. It releases too much amount of carbon dioxide, and which is very dangerous. See, few content or maybe few amount of or less amount of or moderate amount of carbon dioxide is definitely required by the plants, but too much of release of this carbon dioxide may be very harmful to the people or maybe the other organisms. So this is how we are, with the help of coal mining, we are trying to, or with the process of coal mining, we are destructing the earth, right? Next comes up are the infrastructural facilities. Infrastructural facilities means whatever the amenities we require, whatever the facilities we require, say road construction, the building construction, the dam construction, electricity power plant construction, these all leads to what? They provide us with the comfort, but somewhere or the other we are disturbing the nature, or we are disturbing the earth, right? So too much of these kind of activities will lead to the environmental destruction. Next comes up is landfill areas. Landfill areas means we are trying to dump all those kind of say wastes. It may be the garbages, it may be anything which we are not using, we try to dump it on the land. That creates a kind of collection of the garbage on a particular area, and that is what is known as landfill, or many a times a pit. Means એક ખાડો કરી દેવામાં આવે, in that we dump every kind of garbage into it. Over a period of time, due to chemical reactions, what happens is it degrades, it disturbs the environment, it disturbs the land, it creates more amount of say few chemicals somewhere, and it creates lot many pressure, it creates lot many kind of problems for the land in that area, right? So that is what is landfills. What happens because of that? It disturbs the quality of air, maybe water supply, toxic things are being released, and ultimately the land and the environment gets disturbed. The next comes up is deforestation. Deforestation is no new point to you. Deforestation is all about the cutting down of the trees, right? At times we keep on cutting the trees without realizing, without noticing that somewhere we need to grow also, because if we do not grow and we do not create afforestation, but we are say connected with more activities of deforestation, that means somewhere we are cutting the life for us itself, because plants are the major source of providing oxygen to us. And if we keep on cutting down the trees, that means the oxygen content from the atmosphere will reduce, and that will create the survival problems for future. But deforestation has taken up a great pace in the past few years because of our technological advancement, because of the luxuries, and because of the comforts that we need. We have cut down the trees to a major extent, and what we have done is we have realized, without realizing, that too much of deforestation will be very much harmful to us. On the other hand, what should be done? If we deforest for any reason, that means if the cutting down of the trees is taken up, then on the other hand there should be also planting of the trees, so that ultimately we can balance the environment. Anyways, these are said to be the 14 major reasons that causes the environmental destruction, right? We are creating problems for environment, and somewhere we need to avoid this. So these causes should be learned, these causes should be understood, and ultimately we should try to see that we can stop this environmental destruction. So this is the end of today's lecture, right? When we meet next, we shall be seeing a few more aspects of environmental science. By the time we meet next, it's a goodbye from my side. Take care of yourself. Thank you.